No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is a special edition of Outspoken, and I am so excited to say British soap legend. Let's call him a bit of an anti-woke campaigner these days as well. My good friend who I haven't spoken to for some time on air, so I cannot wait. Charlie Lawson is in the house. But do please click to subscribe to our brand new independent news source. Turn on the notification bell. Then you'll be alerted to our new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. The best way to support Outspoken, of course, is by subscribing to a monthly paid membership for access to the uncancelled after show. You can do this via Substack, by the way, www.outspoken.live. However, it's completely free if that's all you can do. And I completely understand that. Times are really tough at the moment. The most important thing is that you join our thriving independent media community. The great thing about Substack, by the way, is it's a safe space, free of censorship. So your support from just £5 a month not only gives you that 30 minutes of extra content with our uncancelled after show on weekdays. It returns on Monday, by the way, but it also allows me to continue making this independent daily news show. But now, let's go. Charlie Lawson, it has been too long.
Too long, Dan, too long. Listen, fair play to you, Squire. Well done, you.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you. It's been a year. You know, it's been a year, but actually things are going incredibly well now, and I'm really, really excited to be here. And I'm delighted to have you, because, of course, we are marking the launch of your autobiography. And, wow, Charlie, I expected nothing less, but you've gone there. You have gone there. You have gone there with your life. Nothing is off limits. That's life.
So it is.
It's so you, Charlie. It's so you. How difficult was it, though, for you to make the decision to say, okay, it's all going in the book?
Well, I mean, you know, we're here on Honest Radio, so we are. So this year, back end of last year, and this year we're starting to go extremely quiet. I had been asked many years ago to do an autobiography, and indeed I had done the sort of, as you read the book, I'd done those first sort of 10,000 words when I was actually at Corrie, and Granada TV had a publishing house then of their own, and so I sent them the 10,000 words, and they said, we can't possibly touch this with a barge pole, because as you know, I'm dealing with the back end of my contract when, you know, and I'm telling the truth about how it was the Daily Mirror that actually told me I was leaving.
Anyway, the joys of soap exits, Charlie.
You know exactly what I'm on about. But I mean, so there we were at the back end of sort of COVID a couple of years ago. And when we were all told that if we stood up, our granny was going to die, and if we sat down, she'd be fine, and all that bloody nonsense. And incidentally, anybody out there who had the misfortune to lose someone, my deepest sympathies. But some of the things we were asked to do, like have a sausage roll before you get open the door, and
exactly. Come on, let's be honest. It's when a lot of people's eyes were open to the sort of propaganda that the government tries to infect us with. But we'll come to that. Sorry, continue, Charlie.
Yeah, and so listen, I've kept diaries since the age of about 8 or 9. I hadn't revisited them for a long time, but of course they proved invaluable. And I sat down, and once I'd learned to actually pick up a decent Parker and relearn the mechanics of actually writing, it flowed and flowed and flowed. And then the BBC America correspondent in those days, Emma Varney, who you'll be familiar with. Emma was a great Northern Irish correspondent. She's now American correspondent. And I sent my freehand work to Emma, and she typed it all up. So I couldn't have done it without her. And then I discovered the Word, which is this app on these things. And it actually was done in sort of 7 or 8 months. And as I've said, sometimes quite disturbing to write, but very cathartic. And in the end, I was smiling and I was laughing. So it was a very worthwhile project. And there's no point in writing stuff if you don't tell the truth. So, but as Melvin Bragg said, just remember, your truth is your truth. There will be people out there, and who will say that's not how it happened. As far as I'm concerned, that's how it happened.
And the thing is, Charlie, right? You were one of the great larrikins of Coronation Street in, I think, the glory days of the soap. And it was a little bit wild, right? Things were quite crazy at that time.
Yeah, I think the 90s are probably no holds barred. I mean,
I miss them. I miss the 90s.
There were subjects that we didn't deal with, of course, but then that's, it's Weatherfield, it's not Belfast, you know what I mean? People always ask me, why was the subject of Northern Ireland not brought up by Jim? And I said, well, that is one of the things that is the peace process or not, that is off limits, because you're opening a can of worms that nobody will understand in the first place. But as I've said, there were sort of when we started in '89, there was sort of like 2 episodes, then it went to 3 very quickly, and ended up being 4. So there was less and less room for the crack, so to speak. But by God, we had it in the 90s. We worked hard and played hard. There were an awful lot of egos in that building, but we produced 4 episodes a week. And of course, nobody got on. It's all, everybody didn't get on. I mean, it's all in the book, but I mean, that's the same in any industry.
Yeah, that's showbiz.
You can be working in a TV studio, for God's sake, and
Well, yes, but the slight difference is, Charlie, if we think back to the 1990s, and I remember these days so well, Coronation Street was not just an institution, it was a national obsession. And of course, it was a tabloid obsession. So if you were on Coronation Street at that time, you were a household name. You were world famous in the United Kingdom. That brings a whole load of other pressures because of course, it was also the time, Charlie, and you have dealt with the sharp end of this as well, of tabloid excess, of phone hacking, of blagging, of actually doing whatever it took to find out details about your personal life, because this is pre the world of social media. It was all about selling newspapers.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. People will forget now, sort of all those years forward, and here we are in 25. And look, there was no Levinson, there was nothing in the 90s. It was the Wild West. World, the Sun, the Mirror, the Star, the People, they ruled the roost. And they could break you or make you, and you had to be tough and you had to stand up to them. And as I've said in the book, I certainly bloody well did, because I regarded them as human beings. And if one of them stepped on my toes and they were out of order, then I would take absolutely no prisoners. And a couple of them were witness to my slight anger, shall we say? But they were, and they know who they are, and they know now, and most of them are retired and all sitting in their flats in Portugal or something. But they know who they were, and they know how badly behaved they were. Now, I was a survivor. I was okay, and we always talk honestly, Dan. Mine was really drugs and rock and roll and fighting. Do you know what I mean? I was always a faithful boy to my ladies and what have you. So, there was nothing really salacious to find out.
You were never cancelled in the same way some other former stars of Coronation Street were. It was almost like a different form of cancellation, wasn't it? Because the front page of the News of the World, if it was drugs or sex, could cause you to lose your job.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think quietly Corrie rather liked my antics, because In those days, if you were on the front page for, staying out all night and all the rest of it, it was really rather good for the character. And
Great PR.
My agent would sort of say, "Oh, darling, don't worry. It's absolutely bloody marvelous." And they kind of embraced the crack, so to speak, and my antics, and they were very patient. Although I have to say, I never let anybody down. I might have. I remember once there was a blue letter in my pigeonhole, and I was summoned up to the office, and the then producer said to me, I had been recording a scene in the cabin, and there had been two complainants. Guess who? And they were saying that I was smelling of drink. To which I retorted, "Well, this first scene was at 8:15, and I only got in the door at 7:30. But I was never late, and I didn't let anyone down on the floor. But we lived life to the full, Philip Middlemas and I, and enjoyed ourselves very much. But you were allowed to do that in the 90s.
Yeah, the 90s was wild. It was pre-woke. There was a little bit of political correctness, but you were there from 1989 to 2000. So as I say, it was the glory days. And of course, you made returns to Coronation Street as well. You're one of those characters that is considered iconic. But things changed, didn't they, Charlie? Because even Coronation Street, and look, I'd say it was one of the most old-fashioned productions in a good way. There's something quite old school about Corrie. I haven't been up for a good few years, but when I used to go up, once I'd got into the industry, there was still something quite old school about it. However, it did change.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, social media came along and mobile phones and the whole thing, the world, the planet changed. And also, incidentally, Dan, if you remember the early 90s, the top shelves in W.H. Smith's were the top shelves in W.H. Smith's and every other corner shop. And it certainly wasn't I'm a Celebrity, Mow My Lawn. The top shelf was Men Only, Mayfair, Penthouse, whatever you like. But very quickly, during the 90s, with sort of Kylie and Jason and all the rest of it, and social media being born, celebrity began to take over everything. And indeed, Simon and Nick, who played the two McDonald boys, they bore the brunt of a lot of that. As did we all. Really, it all grew, and with that, the universe of television and celebrity changed, etc., etc. And eventually, a few years ago, started to become so politically correct, and there was a microscope on everybody. And we all know now that if you open your gob and say the wrong thing, we are in an era of at the moment where it will go full circle, incidentally, and everybody will wise up and come back to being friggin' normal again. We know that will happen, and the silent majority, as you know, Dan, are starting to speak up about this crap. But going through everything was changing, and of course the program changed with it. Now, I don't watch it now, but I'm reliably informed by my wife and certain other people who I respect in our business that it is no longer character driven. It is by necessity of the times that they are producing the program. It is issue led. You might watch it, I don't know. But everything in our world of television seems to be issue-led. You have to deal with certain issues. You have to deal with, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but only in a particular way.
Your viewers will know too.
Yeah, only in a particular way. And so what that means is that Weatherfield, which used to be this suburb which we felt reflected the way that we lived. And you didn't necessarily have to be in Northern England to feel that. But all of a sudden, we look at what's going on in Weatherfield and we think, this isn't really the way that we are living. It's interesting, though, you speak about Simon Gregson, who, of course, was your on-screen son and became one of the legends of Coronation Street, and it was you and Beverly Callard, Liz, who were his parents. And while you say everyone didn't necessarily get on, he was the best man at your wedding, right? So it was possible to build some lifelong bonds, even in that sort of quite toxic world of Coronation Street.
Yeah, I mean, look, there were 40 egos in the building when I were there. There's probably about 100 now.
Yeah.
And any actors who tell you that everybody gets on, they're just telling bloody lies, because actors don't all get on. It's as simple as that. But we produced our 4 episodes, and nobody, there was. Look, I said in the book, I mean, there were some huge monumental arguments between Liz Dawn and Lynn Perry. I mean, people used to just sit back and smile and fold our arms and watch with glee. People fell out about press leaks, you know what I mean? It is common knowledge. I fell out with Johnny Briggs because I found out that he'd shafted me to the press over a relationship. So as I say, you get on and you produce the program, but I made lasting friendships. I mean, Sarah Lancashire and I were incredibly close, and had circumstances been different, who knows what may have happened. Simon and I were very close. And as I say in the book, God rest her soul, when my wife, Leslie, was extremely ill mentally and physically, I was driven to the point of, for 10 minutes, I actually thought about ending my life. And of course, I got in touch with Eva Pope, who played Tanya. And she was an extremely close friend of mine, and still is. And I mean, effectively saved my life. So I made incredibly good friends. Peter Armitage, Philip Middlemas, I still see on a monthly basis, and we still get up to no good. We're firm friends, always have been. I made lifelong friends in there, and there were certain people that I would. There she is, and there's Philip. And but there were certain people that I really wouldn't, I wouldn't really be interested in talking to them.
Who's not nice? That's what people want to know.
I started off a relationship with Brian Mosley, and it wasn't a good one. He played Alf Roberts, and we were in on a 2-year contract, and Brian didn't like that, so he didn't, and made it quite clear that he didn't. So we sort of just when we did speak in the green room, it was normally a quiet, well-spoken argument, but we didn't like each other. However, we grew to become very good friends when Brian latterly became ill, and I visited him in hospital at what have you, and men being men, proper grown-up men, we shook hands and got on with it. Same with Johnny Briggs and myself. I played golf with Briggsy every Tuesday, and for a period of time, and then, and in those days there were leaks, and he was leaking, so we had a stand up in the kitchen in the green room, and then I saw him many years later. We didn't really speak after that, and then I saw him years later at the Do at the Piccadilly Hotel in Manchester, and I was with Debbie. And I said, darling, just give me 5 minutes here, because enough's enough now, and he's getting on, and we need to just. So I went up. This is Johnny, come here, mate. We shook hands and went and had a beer, and the rest was history. So that's what sort of grown men do. There you go.
Yes.
But by
Guinness
and large,
in hand, Charlie.
By and large, actors, with notable exceptions, through the years, because they have personalities and large egos, as we all do, there is the odd clash, some worse than others. But I would say that I've been doing this 44 years now, and there's probably, I could count the people on one hand that I'm not interested in. Some might surprise you, but you'll have to wait for part 2 for that, I'm afraid.
What's William Roache like to work with? Obviously the original Ken Barlow, but he's gone through massive ups and downs, obviously came very close to cancellation himself.
Yeah, he would be the only person, along with Julie Goodyear, that I'd ever heard of when I joined Corrie. I've never watched it. And I was at the National Theatre at the time and very po-faced and sort of thinking, well, what in the name of Jesus would I want to go up and do a soap about Manchester for? So I turned it down previously. And then it was a toss-up between joining the bill and Corrie on a full-time basis. Now, um, I always called William, never Bill. He was always William to me, and he always called me Charles. And from day one, we had a great mutual respect. I used to. I was on the cast committee with William for many years, and I've witnessed him standing up for the rest of the cast on the sixth floor up in Granada TV against the bigwigs, along with Helen Worth and Mick Lavelle. And he played cricket for me, William. He was opening batsman. He had the most wicked sense of humour, and he a thorough gentleman. And don't forget, Dan, he was a veteran. He'd served in Aden, you know what I mean? He never bragged about anything like that. So, a great man. And I saw him a couple of months ago in Prestbury, my village. I was actually outside the Foxhole, one of our local hostelries, and somebody said, "Have you seen who's across the road?" And I immediately crossed the road, left my pint, and went across. And he was there with Verity, his daughter. And we hadn't actually spoken for a couple of years since I'd been back of my many revisits back to Corrie. And we had I had 10 minutes in the middle of the village having a good chat. And sadly, we were meant to go and have lunch the following week, but filming schedules changed, so as they do. So we missed out on that. But he is a consummate professional. If ever there was, whether you believe in knighthoods for actors or whether you don't, I couldn't be arsed, really. I'm not that bothered. But if there's one person who deserves a knighthood, and that is William Roache.
Yeah, and he doesn't have an honour, does he? He doesn't.
I think he probably does, Danny. I think he may have an OBE, but
okay,
your
but
boys in the office will tell me that.
I don't know if he does, because they look at tax, and he's got into this tax issue lately. But I'm completely with you. I mean, 92 years old, the longest running actor, I believe, on any television show anywhere in the world.
On the planet.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary. I think he's actually in the Guinness World Records for that. But unfortunately, Charlie, we've got to be honest about it. Despite some legends like him, Coronation Street is no longer what it was. The ratings are tanking. The storylines are woke. And you have predicted that it's possible that it won't even be around in a decade.
Yeah, I mean, it's what are we? The 64th anniversary or whatever the hell it is. I can't 64th. I just think that the way we are now as consumers watching television and watching that box in the corner of our room is changing. And some of it for the worse, some of it for the better. As I say, I really haven't watched an awful lot of stuff at all. I pick and choose, and I suspect an awful lot of people do. So whereas in the 90s, we were at between sort of 12 and 20 million most of the time. I just think I can't work out whether anybody's. I mean, for God's sake, you could watch Dame Maureen there until the cows come home. There's some absolutely great stuff, and I caught a couple of young performances, some of whom a number of years ago were not up to scratch, but I've seen a couple recently that I've been passing through from the dining room to the kitchen or whatever, and I've watched the show. I watched the performance on Corrie, and I thought, well, that's shit hot. That girl's got something, which is great. But Debbie would watch it. I don't. But the whole thing, I think Emmerdale Farm, EastEnders, Coronation Street, I just think they're kind of running out of steam, and not necessarily talent. I just think the way people soak up TV now is totally different. And if they're getting 5 million now, that's a terrible indictment of something. But I suspect it's probably a terrible indictment of the human race and what we sort of consume now and how we consume it now. I might be totally wrong. What do I know? But I know how commercial television works. And believe you me, if the people in Golden Square aren't making a dollar out of the advertising, you'll be out in your arse. They don't hang around, you know what I mean? So look, we shall see. I would love to be invited to the 74th reunion party. I doubt I'll be invited to this one actually, but who cares? I don't even know whether they're having a 64th or whatever. But look, I hope it lives forever, but I can't see it myself.
No,
Your friend Kevin O'Sullivan will agree. And he knows television backwards.
They're done. Unfortunately, I don't watch any soaps anymore, and I used to be someone who did consume them. But Charlie, look, there is a bigger picture to all of this, though, and it is the change that has happened to the world. And you actually took a big risk because in your industry, as an actor, to say what you think, to campaign against woke madness, and to campaign against government overreach, which you did throughout the COVID pandemic, and that's how we first became friendly, is brave. And I know that word is overused, but the reality is, Charlie, you have lost a huge amount of work. You have lost a huge amount of money because you decided to go public with views that, let's be honest about it, the vast majority of the public agree with, but in your industry now are considered unpalatable, not necessarily unpalatable to think, but unpalatable to express publicly.
Yes, you are 100% right. 2024 has been the worst year I've had in 44 years.
Wow.
And I have absolutely no doubt. I've talked to people I know in the sort of drama department, the BBC. I have talked to contacts in all the industry, and they would say, Charlie, we haven't heard this. But the facts are slightly different. I go up for stuff, and you send in show reels and all the rest of it, and it's almost as if there is I don't know whether there is or not, but it would appear that there's almost a vetting department somewhere in White City. And the example which I've talked about, and is a fact of life. I got a couple of silly jobs there last year. One of them was going to be great fun because it was me and Miss Callard, Beverly Callard, and we were going to do Celebrity Antiques Roadshow. And so that was all jolly fun. That was all going to be rather good. And in the meantime, or previous to getting that job, and I also got another job which disappeared as well, which will remain nameless for reasons I can't discuss. But so there we were, all set to travel down to Norfolk and do Celebrity Antiques Road Trip, or whatever it's called. In the meantime, I had joined with Sharon Davis, our Olympic athlete.
Amazing woman.
Bygone days of yore. Amazing woman who has got huge courage and speaks up all the time.
And has lost a lot as a result.
Yes, about women's sports, which I care deeply about, and all the rest of it. And I had joined Kelly J. Keane in the Let Women Speak movement. I had retweeted several of her tweets, etc., etc. And my agent received an email from the BBC saying they couldn't use me. There's our Sharon. They couldn't use me because I was anti-trans. And you and I had a conversation about this, and I said, I don't care if you identify as a friggin' plant pot. Just, keep away from women's sports, etc., and all this lot. No, that you were. I think you're allowed to say it now, actually. But I mean, a couple of years ago, you weren't, and I lost a job out of it. I lost 2 jobs, incidentally, out of it. But people are now, thanks to you, Dan, and thanks to, I don't know, thanks to Sharon and Kelly and all the rest of it, the silent majority are starting to open their gobs and talk about things that there's Kelly, that they wouldn't talk about 2 years ago because they couldn't. But gradually, people now are starting to speak up and say, for God's sake, catch yourself on. Can we not even discuss this issue or whatever? You know what I mean?
Totally, but it's chilling, Charlie. I don't think you should underestimate how chilling it is. We should never normalize the fact that you lost work from a publicly owned broadcaster, by the way, the broadcaster that we both have to pay into if we want to watch terrestrial television. And by the way, thank God that more and more people are saying no to the license fee. And I fully support that because I want the BBC defunded. But that's a whole other conversation. But how chilling that because you are simply advocating for biological reality and the protection of women, right? And so that means the protection of women in single-sex spaces, the protection of women in sport, that is not at all anti-trans, yet
No.
that directly leads you to losing jobs. Now, Kelly J. Keane, she doesn't believe in trans. She believes that some people choose to dress differently. Now, I would argue that she's backed up by science there. But I just think it's really chilling. I don't think it should be underestimated that because you back a biological reality or you back women's rights, you lose work. That is disgusting.
Yeah, and I mean, my agent, John, bless him, persuaded me not to get in the car. Simple as that. Because I was very angry, and and I very nearly did get in the car. But had I got into the car and headed south, God knows what would have happened because I was very angry and I wasn't going to talk to the receptionist, put it that way.
No,
But look,
no.
it is what it is. I still
Yeah, but it shouldn't be
up.
though, should it?
No, I know,
It
Dan. Of
shouldn't
course,
be.
I know that, and thanks to people like yourself, and like I said in the book, I learned at a very young age, above all else, to thine own self be true. And I can look at the mirror every day and hold that to my heart. But and I think things will slowly get better. Well, they couldn't get any worse than a couple of years ago, you know what I mean? But I still get offered I'm still up for jobs at the BBC and all the rest of it. And also, Dad, the fact of life is that I'm a I'm a white-haired 64-year-old old tough guy from Belfast. And really, there are fewer and fewer parts for the likes of me around.
Yes.
And I know damn well I could go back to the theatre, no problem at all. But at 64, I don't want to be away from Debbie anymore. I don't want to be away at the York Theatre Royal or down in London. I really don't. I mean, I wouldn't go to London if you paid me anyway. That place,
Very
not a lot
wise.
scares me. But
Trust me. Very, very wise. But no,
yeah.
But you are right, and it feeds into a much bigger narrative that has been driven largely by woke advertising agencies in London, in New York, in Los Angeles. I've covered a lot, Charlie, which is that they want to present a different reality of the world. So I was always all for what used to be described as diversity, right? But to me, diversity meant accurately reflecting the population of the country. Now what we see, Charlie, is a complete false representation of this country, where you would believe that this country, if you watch a lot of shows on ITV, and this is just stating a fact, or the BBC, you would actually believe that we were living in a minority white country. And as a straight, slightly older Charlie, although, you've still got it, but as a straight, slightly older white man, you are now an endangered species on television. We see it all the time. Anytime the BBC replaces an older white man, they always do it with a much younger minority in some form. So it's hard,
Yes,
actually. It's a bizarre thing, but it's actually hard now for older straight men.
yeah, no, I do. But then Liz Kershaw and other, people throughout the broadcasting industry have been saying this for a number of years about ageism or whatever. Look, listen, everything has changed so much now, and it has become so difficult to say things. I watched the news over the last couple of days on whatever station I listen to in the kitchen or watch on the iPad or whatever. And I heard, and more this morning, details of the death of a child. And it was disgusting. And people are now asking the question on certain radio stations, certain channels, certain social media sites, saying perhaps people should have done more, and they didn't when they heard howling and screaming from the house, because they didn't want to be considered as racial bigots. Teachers ignored the signs, although I think I rest my case. There she is in the middle. People ignored the signs of what was going on because they were scared of being tarred with the racist brush. This is just one example, and it's the one that moved me to tears yesterday when I heard the details of what had happened to this young girl, and the questions being asked about race, and never mind marrying your first cousin, for God's sake. You know what I mean? Look,
Yeah.
and bigger.
Which we
bigger
now have
girls,
MPs actually arguing against making illegal, by the way. That's where we're at in this
well,
country.
look, surprise, surprise, what goes on in that house. But I simply refer to the small but growing minority of people who are beginning to grab their nuts, get a bit of courage, and speak up, because we have to, because our society is worse when we can't call things out. I firmly believe that. I don't think you should be punished for it. I think you should be allowed to call things out. And quite frankly, everybody else does. But as soon as the minority do, we are tarred with the same brush and called the minority. And I'll tell you one thing, Dan, we are not the minority. The minority are the people who speak up, but there is a silent majority that is growing, yes, and becoming more and more vocal.
Well, I describe us as the silenced majority, because
some of us,
yeah,
won't be.
Yeah, no, and exactly. And I encourage more, because the more and more people who refuse to be silenced, the harder it is to silence everyone, if you see what I'm saying. But we did see some really shocking and egregious examples last year, Charlie, which I've covered on the show, but the mainstream media tend to ignore. So obviously, I'm sure, like the vast majority of the population, you were very touched by the death of the 3 young girls in Southport who had simply turned up to a Taylor Swift dance concert and ended up stabbed to death. Now, there's actually a lot, Charlie, even now, that I still can't say, that I would really want to say because of this country's contempt of court laws. But if we just put that to one side, there were people, Charlie, who were very angry about what happened. Of course, some of the behavior maybe went too far, but we're seeing a world now where people like Judy Sweeney and Lucy Connolly and Cameron Bell, these are all women that I've spoken about on the show, have been locked up either for posting a video on X or maybe saying something on Facebook that's considered beyond the pale. These people are being locked up, in some cases up to 9 years, Charlie, when we see Hugh Edwards not spend a day in prison. And this was a guy who was protected by the BBC, the same organisation, by the way, that wanted to cancel you or did cancel you for posting to stand up for women. And here's the guy who announced the death of the late Queen Elizabeth II, making paedophilic images. So something's gone wrong, hasn't it? And the problem is, Charlie, people have been terrified into silence. There's that word again, because they think, oh God, I can't risk it. I can't risk being sent to jail. Look at Lucy Connolly, a mother of a 12-year-old girl. She's in jail now for over 2 years.
Yes, and there is no doubt in my mind that that comparison you make about with Hugh Edwards, I would doubt if there is anybody who doesn't think he should have been punished more severely. But and we I think we all know, or we've all heard, that there is more to come out about I've forgotten his name, the terrorist who stabbed those three
Axel
young girls.
Rudy Cabana. Axel Rudy Cabana. And of course, at this point, Charlie, we're actually allowed to say that he has been charged with possessing an Al-Qaeda manual and the production of ricin. I know, but they say, Charlie, and this makes me so angry, they say that the stabbing of those three young girls was not a terror incident. That is what the police say.
Yeah, well, I mean, we could bang on about the police, couldn't we? I mean, you only have to do is turn social media on and see exactly what happens if you're supporting Hamas, and what happens if you're supporting Israel. There are from Norman Brennan to God knows who, ex-police officers and all the rest of it, calling out two-tier policing. You don't, and then we heard about the judge yesterday, Shiner, or whatever he is, Shiner. He's not been locked up, and he was making lies up about soldiers serving with our forces in Iraq, Afghanistan, and all the rest of it. You know what I mean? So, he should be in jail.
But Hugh Edwards, you think should be?
Yeah.
What did you make of that?
Well, I never knew Hugh Edwards, so a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, we knew," and all the rest of it. Well, I didn't know because I've never worked with the man. But I mean, I remember my wife, God rest her soul, at the BBC in the makeup department telling me all about Jimmy Savile. Everybody in the bloody building in White City knew about it, right up the top. And, everybody knew all about it. And I remember Leslie saying to me years and years ago, said, everybody knows about it. You know what I mean? They all knew about Peter Adamson, who played Len Fairclough. They all knew about him in Granada, years ago. So nothing surprises me anymore. But, that we're
well, no, but the BBC,
world we live in,
the BBC, look, just not to harbour the point, but the BBC, which doesn't think that Charlie Lawson should be able to express his honestly held views on protecting women's rights, has harboured some of the country's most prolific paedophiles for decades and decades. It really is extraordinary. But Charlie, stand by. I've got to ask you about this Gregg Wallace situation, which has also been haunting the BBC. So we'll do that in just 1 minute time. Much more from Charlie Lawson. So don't go anywhere. But first, we've been told our whole lives that wrinkle creams were the easiest way to look younger. Now one doctor says that's nothing but old news. According to Dr. John Lake, the world-renowned Beverly Hills beauty expert, most wrinkle fixes on the market are nothing but glorified moisturizers. They hardly make a dent on your appearance, and some can even be harmful to your skin, he said. Recently, Dr. Lake has focused his attention away from mainstream cosmetic practices. Why? So that he can pursue a revolutionary anti-aging breakthrough, one that some experts say could empty the wallets of the cosmetic industry. It's almost like Photoshop for your face, he says. You may even be mad after seeing how easy it is to physically erase your wrinkles from view. His personal clients have dubbed his new do-it-yourself technique the Age Rewinder method because it can take years or even decades off your appearance in under 2 minutes. In light of this amazing breakthrough, Dr. Lake has released a step-by-step video to the public, free and uninterrupted, where he outlines exactly how to use this simple solution from home. If this helps even one person look younger or feel more confident, I'll be thrilled knowing I helped, Dr. Lake commented. The video has since gone viral. At first, it was shared by users on Facebook, but since then, it's racked up over 2.3 million views and counting. So far, the comments and feedback have been outstanding, with thousands of women reporting they look decades younger. One viewer even commented, "Best results of anything I've used. I can't believe how well this works. I'll never stop using this. I don't understand how it works, but the results are great. Thank you." So you can find out much more about this yourself right now. Go to bhmd1.com/outspoken, or it's probably much easier to just click on the link in the description box below. I will repeat the address for you now though, www.bhmd1.com/outspoken. Now, there is one thing Dr. Lake asks from his viewers. If watching this video helps you look and feel younger than you have in years, then please share this video with your friends and loved ones. Together, we have the power to help as many women reclaim a youthful look as possible. So go watch the video at bhmd1.com/outspoken right now, or just click on the link in the description box below. But now, back to the show. Charlie Lawson, I was absolutely horrified by the fact that the BBC decided for about 2 weeks last year, and actually not just the BBC, most of the mainstream media, Woke TV, Sly News, that the biggest story in the world, not just the country, the biggest story in the world was the fact that Gregg Wallace, the host of MasterChef, or at least he was the host of MasterChef, the now suspended host of MasterChef, had made some inappropriate off-color jokes, maybe being a little bit old-fashioned, but all of a sudden he was being presented as if he was the new Jimmy Savile, which I think was a completely dishonest representation. Now, you actually got in some real trouble for this, Charlie, in the woke media, because you were asked to speak about Gregg Wallace, and you said, "Listen, I've been asked several times, so I'm just going to answer. Oh God, we're living in this world where I'm effing offended. That's upset me. Kirsty Walk, she's a top journalist, top bird, great at her job. But if Gregg Wallace said something that offended her, why in the name of God didn't she just turn around and say, 'Shut the F up, Baldy'? But we're in this country where everyone's getting offended, God almighty." And you know what? They might criticize you for that, Charlie, but I say absolutely. Because we cannot be cancelling people based on offence archaeology for a joke they may have told 20 years ago. I mean, I know what it was like in newspaper newsrooms 20 years ago, Charlie. People said crazy things. I'm sure there was lots of comments that went on in Coronation Street 20 years ago that would probably get people cancelled now. But what was this about, and were you shocked by the backlash that you received for simply, I think, stating some common sense?
Well, first of all, if you'd been in the green room at Granada TV in the 90s with Sarah Lancashire, me, Phil Middlemas, Eva Pope, all the girls, Annie Kirkbride was one of the worst, Julie Goodyear, all the rest of it, we would all have been fired. It was the dirtiest, rudest, most politically incorrect place I've ever served my 44 years in the business. That's just a fact of life.
But nowadays, I love that. I wish I had been there.
It was brilliant. Listen, I have heard, about Gregg over the years, and he wouldn't be the best at telling a joke or making a crack or whatever. However, it never bothered me. I was asked about it, and like you've just said, I mean, I'm surprised Kirsty didn't bloody slap him or whatever. But this offence has now become something that is taken if you look cross-eyed at someone. I mean, it's just, thank God we've still got Northern Ireland in places, because it doesn't exist over there. So it doesn't, you give as good as you get. But I mean, look, Dan, you tell me. I was unaware. I mean, I got a few tweets from people sort of saying, you can't say that, Charlie. And I said, why in the name of God not? I respect Kirsty Walk. I think she's a great journalist, and why in the name of God didn't she turn around and say, wait, Baldy, blah, 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 or whatever? I mean, I just think, you know, I kind of think to myself, what are we going to hear about now? I mean, I'm sure somebody out there, probably not watching this, but there'll be somebody out there who'll say some Charlie Lawson said this about 35 years ago. You know what I mean? And I'll probably be in trouble for something of it, because I've said a lot of stuff over the years. But it's a sad reflection, I think, of the world we live in. And listen, don't get me wrong, right? If Gregg had said something to a friend of mine who was on there, and I thought it was out of order, I'd have got him round the back of the set and said, "You apologise to that girl now, or I'm going to slap your ass, son." You know what I mean? But
yes, but deal
it's
with
funny
it
because
that way. Exactly. Deal with it at the time. Because the other thing I think that we risk, Charlie, is that we start to undermine what are serious crimes. And I'm very concerned now, and what I went through myself with the attempt to cancel me, and maybe some people would say it was successful, although here I am. But what I find so disturbing is that the goal when people are going through a cancellation crisis is just to make everyone think that they are the same as Jimmy Savile. There's no sense of perspective whatsoever. And it's like, I'm sorry, we have to treat genuine sexual criminals, genuine serial rapists, genuine pedophiles like Jimmy Savile, like Rolf Harris, like Hugh Edwards, in a very different way to a working class lad done good like Gregg Wallace, who might make some really inappropriate wisecracks at times. But there is no sense of perspective, Charlie, just like there was no sense of perspective in the coverage of my situation with Lawrence Fox.
No, and I mean, most of the people I've talked about in the industry are all yawning about Gregg and say, "Oh, for God's sake, catch yourself on." You know what I mean? And people who have complained, and I would look. I'm sure there are some civilians, if you like, who have done MasterChef, have been offended, I would say, and upset. And I would hope that they've received an apology. I really don't have any time for people who are celebrities, so to speak, not being able to stand up for themselves. Come on, for Christ's sake, get a grip. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And I wouldn't want to be known anyway. I wouldn't be wanting to broadcast that I felt offended by someone in the first place. I mean, why would you want anybody to know? Just take action yourself and sort it out.
But this is a much bigger point, though, I think, Charlie, and I think it, unfortunately, is part of the infiltration of the woke mind virus, which is that a lot of people in 2025 believe that they should never be offended. Whereas I would argue, actually, offense is a really important part of society. And the fact that the fact that you are offended by something doesn't mean that that person should be cancelled, that that TV show should be taken off air, that you should, cast some great protest about it. Just switch it off. And I think offence archaeology in particular is something that I find so despicable, because people are now, there's almost like a witch hunt against people who get into the public eye. And we see this even in the political realm, Charlie, and this really concerns me. And actually, I want to ask about your political ambitions in just one moment, but this concerns me too, because we saw some really good, solid candidates before the last election, for example, who were running for Reform UK. But because they had posted something on what was then their Twitter account, say in 2012, they were then removed. Now, some people would say you can't blame Reform UK and Nigel Farage for doing that, because it's all about how the mainstream media would react to those posts. But I also feel we have to live in a society where actually sometimes you can say something, maybe you said something years ago, maybe you disagree with it now, but actually the drive for cancellation is sometimes so almost like hysterical. It takes over people and
Yeah, and I
organizations.
mean, yeah, and listen, you'll be aware of this now. Uh, I don't know Anne Whittingham at all, and I don't know what makes her tick. But I think she was speaking at the Oxford Unit. I
Yes.
saw something Oxford Debating Society, and she was brilliant on taking offence. You know, saying you cannot go through life worrying about being offended. Jesus Christ, Dan! If I took offence at everything that had been written about me, I'd have jumped out the bloody window by now. You know what I mean? It's just people are wallowing in being offended, and it really really pisses me off. But I've been saying that to you for a number of years now. You know what I mean? I think the world's a I think our children are being raised to by certain parents, not all parents, because I know low ground here and in other places. You know, we're bringing up our children to be offended, and you know, God Almighty, what would you have done in 1939?
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. I mean, look, we're certainly not raising people, Charlie, are we, to deal with the threats that are coming, because trust me, they don't think in the same way in China or Russia.
Yeah.
And this wokery and this constant need to be offended is actually weakening our society, and I believe is actually part of the destruction of the West, which is much, much more important. But look, Charlie, finally, I just want to ask, have you considered entering politics? Because I know there'll be a lot of outspoken viewers at home thinking, this is the type of guy who we need as an MP. And why the hell not?
Um, I got a message from someone about 3 or 4 months ago, back home in Northern Ireland, asking me if I would consider running. It wasn't something I had considered, and the answer to your question is no, because if I because I don't think I'd have a prayer, because I'd have to form. I don't know what party I'd join, and I'd have to be an independent, I think, or something. And the only other independent I met over the years was Martin Bell, who was a great journalist, but I was never quite sure what he stood for, apart from his white suit. Bless him. But yeah, it has been asked several times, and I I think my maiden speech in the House of Commons would offend so many bloody people.
Are you
I
allowed to
think
swear? Are you?
I think I would be the first one to be ejected, and I just think it's funny, you
Well,
know.
Charlie, you've been
I mean,
so well behaved today. I don't think you've sworn once.
I
I'm
haven't, because
stunned.
I know, but I don't want to. I want to start off on the right foot and then
Okay.
see how it goes, and then next time I'm on.
Oh, well, Charlie, look, you've got to come back, because obviously today it's been so great to talk about your life, but I absolutely love it when we're just chewing the fat over some of
Yeah.
the crazy news stories of the day. But look, this autobiography is absolutely brilliant. I really recommend that people read it. It is available on Amazon, right? That's where I got it from.
It's on Amazon. The audiobook will be out in February.
Are you
The
are you
facts.
reading it all?
Yeah, I read it all and wrote it all and all the rest. There's been no sort of ghostwriter involved or anything like
Gosh,
that.
how long did that take to record the audiobook?
5 days. It's a good listen. Um, in answer to your question as well, you can order it from Waterstones or anywhere you like. I don't think it's on the shelves of many Waterstones at the moment, because as we were talking before, but as in watching TV, um, uh, reading books is a disappearing skill, believe it or not. And you know, Waterstones have books on their shelves that have been there for years. So yeah, you can order it from from every bookshop. It's in some bookshops, mostly independents, and it's a good read, folks.
It is. That's Life, So It Is, My Story by Charlie Lawson, a candid, raw memoir of a TV national treasure, available now from Amazon, and you can also get it instantly on a Kindle edition. I'm ashamed to say, Charlie, I'm now a Kindle guy. I know I used to I loved the hard copy books, but now I order
Well,
it
there
on
you
Kindle,
are. You see, the case rests.
Yeah, but you can get that on Amazon, because that's how I got it. So it is. I know for a fact it is available. I think it's hard. You can either get it hardcover or on the Kindle edition.
Yeah, it'll be hardcover, and then they'll do the softback in the spring, I think, probably.
Amazing.
Well, later on this year, anyway, in 25.
Well, Charlie, it has been so good to be reunited. You were one of those guests that a lot of people, because, I've had a lot of people on from my GB News days, and I've had lots of requests for you to come on. So I thought this was the perfect way to do it. But we'll have to do it with the news next time you're back.
We'll do the adult version next time.
Yes, exactly. And there's so much to get you annoyed about. I'm pretty sure we'll be having to pull out that swear jar. But Charlie Lawson, Happy New Year to you. So brilliant to have you. That's Life, So It Is, available now. And of course, thank you so much, Charlie. And of course, the best way for you to support Outspoken is by signing up for a monthly paid membership, which gives you access to the uncancelled after show, which I promise returns on Monday. We've had a couple of weeks off, but we're back live with the uncancelled after show Monday. On Substack, you also get my exclusive reporting and columns, access to our live chats, the chance to join a thriving community. Substack is free of censorship. www.outspoken.live is the address. It is possible to sign up and subscribe completely for free. Hopefully you know that by now, but don't worry, you can do that, and it's really important. I know how difficult times are, but we are trying to build an Outspoken community here, so please come and join the revolution. We're back tomorrow at 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Hit subscribe right now if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, and most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you. Thank you so much for your company today.